He'll turn them on upstairs.
I'm going to call to order the Tuesday, May 19th, 2020 meeting of the Iredell County Board of Commissioners. At this time, I'd ask you to please bow your heads in silent prayer for our country, our state, and our county as we continue to deal with defeating the COVID-19 virus and reopening our economy. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, before we get to the adjustments, I'd like to welcome back Commissioner Howe. He is recovering well from a recent surgery and hospitalization, and it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
And also want to note for the record that Commissioner Marvin Norman is joining us by telephone and participating in the meeting from his home. Okay, at this time, Ms. Jones, would you please review any adjustments to the agenda?
The only adjustment is to pull the first item from administrative matters and do that right after the last appointment before the board.
Okay, thank you. Any further adjustments? Is there a motion to approve the agenda as modified?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Halp. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. We have no presentations of special recognitions or awards this evening. We do have an appointment before the board, two appointments. The first is Executive Director Geraldine Gardner of the Centralina Council of Governments, who will give us an update on the agency and its response and recovery related to COVID-19. And she should be joining us by phone.
Yes, she's by phone, but I do want to point out one thing. Please note, we did have an amended agenda, so please make sure that we're going by the one that has the note in red up here in the top corner. Mm-hmm. This is the amended. There was some numbering discrepancies with the other agenda, so just so we're all on the same page, use the one with the red note at the top.
Red note, this one right here.
Mine's on the right. You said the left?
Well, I put it in the middle for you all, so you
Oh.
can see it a little bit better. So.
Mine is on the left, but yours may be in a different location. But just to make sure that we're following the same agenda.
When I punched holes in it, it was a little right in the middle, so I changed your guy.
No, we just keep having problems, you know.
I couldn't even use the telephone.
Adapt and overcome, right?
Are we ready for Geraldine?
Yeah.
Geraldine, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. We
Yes.
hear you good.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I really regret that I'm not standing in front of you all in person to say hello and to introduce myself, but I appreciate you making time on your agenda this evening for me. I want to just take a few moments to introduce myself since I'm relatively new to my role at Centralina. I've been in the position for just over a year. And in that first year, one of my early priorities was to get to know our member communities. In fact, I think one of my very first meetings was with Commissioner Halp and with Ms. Jones just over a year ago. And that conversation was so valuable to me in understanding more about Iredell County, your needs and expectations for the organization. And what I took away from that conversation and from many others that I've had across the region over that first couple of months last year really helped to shape my priorities and an agenda for our organization. And I'd like to take a few moments to share some of those things with you tonight. Now, heading into my second year on the job, my focus is really about reaching out and trying to introduce myself and build relationships with a broader set of county commissioners across the region. And I really appreciate both Commissioner Haupt and Ms. Jones's support in doing so and your time this evening. So I believe in your agenda packet you have a one-page front and back document that I shared with Ms. Anderson just to help guide a little bit some of my remarks this evening. So one of the things that we did last spring, and this was really a reflection of some of the things I heard in my tour around the region and meeting with local governments, is we did a strategic review of COG, kind of took a hard look at what are we doing well, where do we need to improve. And one of the things that came out of that process was the opportunity to refresh our mission statement and really make it very clear to our members and to our region, what do we stand for? What do our 45 staff members who come to work every day really do to move our region forward and to improve our member governments? And so our mission really is to strengthen regional collaboration and spark local action, ultimately trying to expand opportunity and improve quality of life. And what we do, how we live this mission every day in our work is really by working at three different levels that you see highlighted here on the top half of the handout. First, as our role of regional convener, we're really about trying to facilitate an area-wide or regional planning and collaboration. So how do we respond to opportunity like the growth of our region and do that in a smart way that benefits the unique communities across the Centralina region, or in challenging circumstances like we have right now with COVID-19, how do we all come together and help learn from each other to help what we're doing in our communities? The second level at which we work is really that local government support. So this is an opportunity area, frankly, in my conversation with Commissioner Haupt and with Ms. Jones, where you all were looking to us to provide a little bit more capacity and support and really be there when you picked up the phone and called us because you needed something. So this has been a major area of my focus in building up the organization, which I can talk about in a little bit more detail. And then finally, we work at the individual level. So through our Workforce Development Board and our Area Agency on Aging, we're really providing direct human services and talent development support, both to individuals and to businesses. So what you see in that big blue box on your sheet in front of you, those are the 3-year strategic goals that we worked on with our delegates, with the regional managers. They're guiding our work, really anchoring our activities. For the first time last fiscal year, the organization had a published work plan that was really our public statement about what we stood for and what we're working on. We're in the process of developing the work plan right now for next fiscal year and have had a survey with managers and with delegates to get input from our members. On the second sheet of the back side of the page, you see some examples of recent activity that we've been engaged in the county. In addition to the county, the city of Statesville, Mooresville, and Troutman, they're all members. But as you can see from those bullets there, and I'm not going to read through them since they're in front of you, our work has really focused on economic development, collaboration with the IEDC in particular, working with on the talent issue, collaboration, especially with the NC Career Work Centers that we have, 2 in the county, working with businesses to understand their talent needs, and then working with the Economic Development Corporation around pitching businesses that are looking to come to the county and helping to recruit different talent or upskill talent in the area to take advantage of those jobs. We have a very strong partnership with the Council on Aging and work very closely with them, especially with this uncertain circumstance around COVID-19. I'm trying to make sure that the aging block grants are deployed across the county to provide services for the older adults of the county, and really doing creative partnerships, for example, with the county and Duke Energy around the summer heat fan relief program. At the local level, we have contracts in the town of Troutman. We've helped with their manager search. They just made an announcement this week. We led that process. We've worked in the city of Statesville, facilitating their strategic plan with their board. So lots of different smaller activities with our municipal partners as well in the county. I wanted to make sure that you all were aware that we have a number of programs and services that are available to the county as a benefit of membership. We're really ramping up our grants alerts and grant funding strategy development. So that's an area of focus for us moving forward, especially given sort of tight resources in the coming fiscal year. Your county knows very well our ability to help with federal agency troubleshooting. We helped out with the situation in the county library a couple of years ago, so that's an opportunity for additional support if needed. We're really focusing a lot of attention in this last year on ramping up our professional development and training for staff. We want to be a trusted local partner for training and professional development so that our elected officials and staff don't have to travel all the way to Raleigh to get high quality professional development and training. We have a program called COG University. It's free to members, so we really hope that county staff and as we ramp up elected official training, that's something you all would want to take advantage of. And then finally, technical assistance services. If there was one thing I took away from my conversation with Commissioner Halpin with Ms. Jones last year was that there were a couple of instances where the county needed support from COG in, for example, a pay and class study or administering a housing rehabilitation grant program where we just weren't able to provide that service to you. And that's just something that's not acceptable from my perspective. And under my leadership, the organization is really enhancing its capacity to provide that support to members with additional staff hires to be able to be on the other end of that phone when Ms. Jones calls us and asks for support. So that's something that you have my commitment that is really a focus of ours, and we encourage that two-way communication. Finally, I'll just close with a couple of examples of what we're doing related to COVID-19 response. We really think this is an opportunity, kind of a moment for regionalism as we start to move from county by county response to the crisis to recovery. So on the response side, we've been holding pretty regular, I would say weekly, if not bi-weekly calls with our regional managers network on very specific topics, hoping to provide expert input. Today, for example, we had a call with Kevin Monroe, the Governor's Intergovernmental Affairs Deputy Director, and Mike Lees, the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for Health and Human Services. So that was just an opportunity to hear directly from the state on what's happening, a projection for when phase 2 might start, and a forum for managers to ask questions and get input. We put together a local government reopening planning guide, as well as some other resources like how to hold virtual meetings. So we're really trying to respond to the unique circumstances that this situation has put us in, and not duplicate resources that might be available, but add value and find the gaps and try to help out where we might need it. In addition, we're really ramping up our federal and state advocacy for localities to make sure there's funding available for all the challenging circumstances that lie ahead of us when it comes to recovery. So I guess my basic point is I really value the county's membership in our organization. I am very passionate about this region and about us working together. And I look forward to open and honest conversation and helping us understand how we can better meet the county's expectations. The last thing I'll just note is my appreciation for Commissioner Help for his active participation in the Board of Delegates as well as the Executive Board. We were really excited that we were able to make some improvements in our conference meeting rooms to enhance his remote participation in our meetings, recognizing that, you know, it's a far drive down to our offices in the evening time, and it's really important that he's able to participate in a meaningful way. So just want to thank him for his engagement and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Geraldine. Any questions from commissioners? I know Commissioner House served on our General Government Task Force, and in that capacity is engaged with Centralina Council of Governments. So I'll reserve any remarks until.
I just want to say on behalf of our board and our manager, we appreciate your efforts to better the services, you know, to each county, because each of us have different needs, and that way we're trying to, I know it's hard with juggling municipalities and counties, and we've had those discussions, but I want to thank you along with our staff for the job y'all have done with the remote challenges during this pandemic situation. But a question I have is on the grant funding. During our board meeting last week, I didn't get a chance to ask the question of, is there grants available to counties that are not available to municipalities or specific to one or the other? And if there are, can you make sure that Manager Jones gets those grants that would be specific to counties so we can know, you know, what and how to try to apply for those and get those for our departments?
Absolutely. So I know there's some specific funding available through the COVID-19 relief. The Federal CARES Act had the local government funding, and the state elected in the most recent COVID-19 relief bills that passed the General Assembly that funding would be pushed down to the county level. And I believe the county plans are due on June 1st on how those funds will be used. When it comes to competitive grants, usually the federal funds don't necessarily distinguish between county and municipal government. Usually it's all under the local government umbrella. But we can certainly keep an eye out, and I'm happy to have a specific conversation with Ms. Jones about the areas of interest that you all have when it comes to grants, and we can be on the lookout and send her way any grant opportunities that may align with those interests.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Geraldine, just let me say I do appreciate the leadership that you brought to the Centralina Council of Governments, your focus on understanding the wide variety of different types of counties and situations that we all have has been much appreciated. That's sort of a customer focus. And as well, you're hearing our concerns about tangible deliverables. You've answered the mail there. You know, as we continue, we are firmly within the Charlotte regional community. And as you know, on the economic development side, most businesses are attracted to Charlotte. And as they look at opportunities, they start to gravitate out. And we want to be able to be in a position to perfectly segue from Charlotte, Mecklenburg to Iredell County. And so appreciate your assistance in that regard. Anything from Beth? Okay. Well, thank you again for your presentation, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate and to achieve regional growth and our specific focus on Iredell County, obviously.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I encourage you to, you know, let me know how I can continue to meet those expectations and better serve the county. And I look forward to being in front of you in person at some time soon in the near future, and hope you all stay healthy. socially distant.
Thank you.
Well, you certainly answered the mail on that one tonight. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our second agenda item, an appointment before the board. This is a presentation of the recently completed comprehensive recreation master plan. Michelle Hepler, who is our Iredell County Parks and Recreation Director, as well as Lisa Wolf, who is from Green Play LLC, that assisted us in this entire effort of collecting data, collecting input from citizens and stakeholders, and then doing inventories of all of our properties and looking to the future to serve the needs of our people. We very much appreciate both of your efforts over the last several months in producing this work product. So I'll turn it over to Michelle to give us a overview, and as well to Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here on this rainy but glorious day. I do want to quickly just kind of tee up and give some background perspective on where we came from and where we are. An adoption of this plan will serve as the guiding framework for Iredell County Parks and Recreation into the future. The document includes recommendations for programming, operations, and maintenance, as well as capital investments for parks and recreation facilities. Determination and support for each recommendation depends on the direction of the Board of Commissioners, the staff, and administration as it relates to budgetary implications each year. Having an adopted master plan not only helps guide the department, but also allows Parks and Rec to be more competitive when applying for federal, state, and local grants, and in turn potentially saving the county expense, which otherwise would come from internal budgeting. This document represents the input and feedback of the citizens of Iredell County, and it will give credibility to the visioning and decision-making of the staff and administrative levels for the future. I think it's also important to note that adoption of this plan tonight does not cost the county any additional funds. The recommendations requiring funding would be addressed on a case-by-case basis and take place during our regular operational and capital improvement budget requests from a Parks and Rec department each year. Failure to adopt may limit our strategic planning and visioning for long-term future. And then just note that it is comprised of recommendations directly related to data and input received from the citizens who chose to participate in the public process. I'll introduce Lisa Wolf from Green Play, turn it over to her, and let her walk you through the process, and just we'll have opportunity for comments afterwards.
Good evening, Commissioners and dedicated staff who are with us today. As Michelle said, I am here representing Green Play, I'm project manager, but I come from a 30-year career in public parks and recreation from right here in North Carolina. So I'm proud to say that we are here today to present what we heard within your community. Is this my advance? Okay, great. Perfect. So Green Play's been around for over 20 years. We work closely with the communities such as yours in providing unique and not cookie-cutter master plans. As you all see and probably have copies, you have a document that's over 100 and I think 28 pages if it was copied on front and back. So a very thorough process, and I'm going to walk you through real quickly because I know we only have 15 minutes. This is basically our agenda for our discussion today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but we'll go through the key points that we're focused on within the master plan. Master plan processes typically take about 8 months to complete. We were really fortunate to be able to complete this within a six and a half month time period with the amount of information we were able to gather. So we started back in December with the strategic kickoff with the staff, and then we held our community engagement with the community members, focus group, stakeholders. Some of you as county commissioners were involved and invited to participate, and we appreciated that feedback. We followed that through a needs assessment of facilities with the level of service of your facilities and any maintenance needs and construction needs that are within those facilities. Then we came back and presented the findings that we saw to the staff, and then some of you were also invited to be at the second public meeting that we had. And then we're here today to present the final plan in hopes that you will move forward with the approval and adoption. It's important for us when we begin this process to really take a look at your overall demographics. You all know what your county looks like, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we capture that information from the U.S. Census. Of course, this is a census year, so this is only data that was able to be captured through last year, the end of last year, moving forward, but obviously projections. This next slide is pretty impacting. Basically, you look at your projected growth rates. Iredell County has grown twice the size of the U.S. You all know that, right? How are we, or how are you, I say we because I'm here represented as a member of your team, how are you addressing that in reference to the quality of life that you're providing? So our public engagement process is very deep. We take a deep dive into really making sure we're hearing from your community. We began with the public meetings, of the focus groups and stakeholders. We had 94 plus participants. We also met with staff. And then we had 10 focus group and stakeholder meetings. Out of those, we identified, and you'll see this pattern as we go through this presentation, of what the key issues were that came as a result of the focus group and stakeholder meetings, as well as the survey, and as well as the level of service analysis of the facilities. So these are outlined basically as maintenance needs of existing facilities. The folks that were involved in these meetings felt that they should be a priority, such as improving some field conditions, accessibility and ADA standards. It's my understanding from the county manager that you all are addressing that through ADA transition plan moving forward. So certainly not to forget about park facilities, because you have a lot of facilities that there are no ways for folks to get down to a soccer field safely in a wheelchair or any other physical challenge. Additional outdoor playgrounds, inclusive, more update playground systems that are not so plastic focused, maybe the parkour, which stresses a health and wellness concept, fitness, health and well-being within the community. You've seen, everybody's familiar with the ninja challenge things, but there's opportunity for creating those type of facilities within the parks. Additional places for practicing for all athletic sports, and maybe considering a pay-to-play sports and hosting large tournaments. Need to find a sustainable funding source for parks and recreation. We heard that quite a bit in all of these different meetings that we had. Additional engagement and awareness about parks and recreation amenities and programs, basically the communication piece to the public of what is being offered. And then considering land acquisition in the future, nothing now, but in preservation of your green spaces that you have available. The priorities of those focus groups, we narrowed down from those issues of what they thought the county should take a really strong focus on. And basically the interconnection of entities and communication and collaboration within the county itself, improving the awareness, which you just heard as an issue, and that's became a priority. The desire for one organization to oversee athletics. To develop the land that the county currently owns and upgrades that could be made at existing facilities. The ADA compliance was a priority. Taking a look and really addressing some equitable distribution and inclusions of programs at some of your facilities, primarily in the northern part of the county. That was brought up, and then research some type of a grant specialist opportunity I heard in the previous meeting, our previous person speaking about the grant opportunities. Obviously, that's through local government sources, but obviously there's funding opportunities for programming pieces too, as you all know, through the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund and other grants. The next method of the plan that we went into with a survey. We had two primary methods of the survey that went out. One was a statistically valid invited survey, which was mailed randomly to 4,000 households within Iredell County. And then they also had the option to complete that invited survey online with a code that you were able to enter in. Did any of you all receive that survey? Yeah, it's great. Thank you. And then the open link survey was really for anybody that didn't receive the random link. They could go on and just complete that information and get feedback as well. So basically we had over 649 total surveys of both open link and the randomly selected invited survey completed. Within the survey itself, we saw some interesting statistics. Greater than 41% of the respondents have lived here in your county for 21 plus years. So longevity is important to your community. 42% of the respondents were under the age of 45, and more than 44% of those were couples with children at home. So we had some discussion in the findings meetings about the gravitation from moving out of the cool and hip areas of North Carolina to more family-oriented areas, and that Iredell County seems to be that draw to recruit the folks maybe moving from Mecklenburg up to have more of a family atmosphere where their kids are becoming more involved and active.
We're not cool and hip. Why didn't somebody tell me? I never knew that. Holy cow, I thought we were cool and hip. Well, that's why we have twice the growth rate. We are cool and hip.
Are cool and hip, yeah.
Man, we need to redefine cool and hip.
Okay, the other option is the parks. You know, you have over 279 acres of parkland throughout the county at 6 different locations. The Iredell Recreation Center is the current 9 acres, and then the others, with the largest there as being the Big Leaf Slopes Park. So then part of the survey, we took the rankings of the top priorities of these respondents and from the questions, and asked them to really prioritize first ranking, second ranking, and third ranking. And you can see the first ranking out of the combination of both invite and overall facilities was aquatic facilities. Now that doesn't necessarily mean swimming pools, that's splash pads. Those type of things came out of the recommendations. Then playgrounds within the existing facilities, and then more community and neighborhood parks. Facilities that your community is using the most, the Iredell Recreation Center obviously stood out. So you've got a lot of use at that facility, followed by the lake with the Stumpy Creek boat launching area. And the other category, I'm not really sure what folks, there was not an opportunity for them to really specify that, but you can see the top 2 there are highly utilized within Iredell County. The 5 greatest needs for programs and activities within the county from the survey basically focused on fitness and wellness programming, community events and festivals, including parades and concerts, outdoor recreational programs, hobby and interest programs and classes, and then adult social sports. The communication methods that everybody preferred and the respondents were basically the highest was social media and the email communication methods, which seems to be a trend nationwide. The top 5 priorities of facilities identified by participants and expanded to be added and expanded upon basically were these highest percentages focused on the community neighborhood parks again, the additional open space and natural areas, special events and festivals. So you go from programs and now you're looking at facilities, and then outdoor event space for those festivals and events, and then the aquatic facility. So you're starting to see a pattern develop as we went through the engagement. The parks and assessment, basically, and the level of service focused on the site visits. Stewart Engineering and Architecture out of Charlotte came up and visited with Michelle and took a couple different tours, and I think they were the ones who actually completed your Jennings Park master plans for that facility. And at those site visits, the assessments focused on ADA access throughout the system. In most parks that are well maintained, but obviously there's some deferred maintenance things that seem to be evident. Sports field quality can be improved to address safety concerns for the play, such as drainage or the amount of use that you're using those fields, lack of trails and sidewalks, connecting to park properties, and then the schools provide some limited use opportunities for programming pieces of the department. The site visits continued with inconsistent branding and signage across the department from park to park. There's some sponsorship signs that might be different at one facility over another. And the look of the signage seemed to be a little confusing for someone coming into your community. The northern areas I mentioned were ranked underserved based on locations and trails in the parks, facilities. The turf quality, once again, and then standards and amenities at those sports fields, such as restrooms, concession areas, were lacking, and then safety surfacing and dated structures at many of the playgrounds. And you can see these pictures you all have seen, are familiar with your facilities. So then we take a look at some of our national standards, which I don't want to take a lot of focus unless someone has a question, but we all know that the importance of the quality of life within your community has a strong, correlation with the economic impact of your community and the economy itself. So if you look at this slide here, and the outdoor recreation industry has grown tremendously, and you can see the economic activity generated by local parks and recreation back in 2017, and this is all, as you can see, the sources here from George Mason University to really evaluate. This is North Carolina in Iredell County within North Carolina. Overall, the state itself creates over that $3 billion mark in economic impact throughout the state. 27,000 jobs plus, give or take, are supported by Parks and Recreation back in 2017, and that North Carolina's ranking 11 out of 51. And then salaries and wages hit the scale of the $951 billion range as well for all components of what types of parks and recreation, quality of life services provide to your community. Investing in the community is important. Similar graphic here, but it's the outdoor side of things. Within the outdoor recreation, basically you're seeing that figure of this chart. I don't know if this has a spotlight or not, but the orange here to the right in the bar graph of $887 billion in the economic side nationally, just on the outdoor recreation side of things. So we know that most people have a tendency to move to areas that are strongly represented with recreational opportunities. We know that households that move into counties that focus on recreation have higher incomes than households moving to non-recreational counties. Earnings per job in rural recreation counties grew 6 times faster than in non-recreation counties, and that recreation appears to drive varied economic benefits, as we just talked about in reference to national trends in the process.
How did you define a recreation county versus a non-recreation county?
So this is nationwide for the most part. So some counties don't provide the services. It depends on whether or not it's similar to a conversation we had earlier about state statute and whether or not it's required for a non-county to provide it or a state to provide it. I guess that would be considered the non-county.
So a recreation county, any public funds expended by County would qualify you as a recreation county.
Yes, yes. You would be considered a recreation county because you're dedicated funding, right? So through all this process, we come up with key themes and what those key themes are, basically. And we heard a lot about the importance of trails and connectivity within the whole Iredell community, knowing the fact that you have strong municipalities within the county itself who have some connectivity now, and focusing and how can you tie your facilities into some of those trails and connectors, and then also add to those within your existing facilities. So say at Big Leaf Slopes you have some awesome trails. How can you expand on those, and how can you connect maybe Jennings to another facility down the road? The recreation center, how do you improve that greenway that's gone through right there up at the road, but the connectivity to the recreation center is not there from that greenway. So there's creating a safe path for folks to get to and from that facility. Accessibility, transportation, entry levels of facilities need improvement. So at the rec center, there were some challenges for accessibility on the front side of that with the ramp that goes in. I think the county probably already knows that that's not quite at the level that it needs to be in the ADA accessibility plan. The addition of, currently the department basically is under the threshold nationally of per capita funding based on your population. So NRPA, the National Recreation and Parks Association, projects that per capita funding should be about $78 per person within a county of this size. Not everybody follows those standards, but just as a point of reference, I thought that would be important for you guys to note. The additional special events and community events seems to be a high and important theme, as mentioned throughout the process. Health and wellness opportunities, improve awareness of parks and recreation branding, wayfinding, and marketing. Develop the current county-owned land and upgrades to those existing facilities for consideration. Maintaining partnerships. We heard that loud and clear in a variety of different meetings. The Leadership Summit was a prime example of how everybody in your community is willing to come together at various organizations and different levels to make this happen. Address the deferred maintenance and maintenance standards of the capital improvement CIP process, and focus some of your opportunities on adventure base, which you do a little bit of through the ropes course, and maybe just taking that step up. When we met when we were here last time and provided the key issues matrix, which you should have within this is just a sample of what this is. And basically what we're doing is we take the qualitative data and the quantitative data and list them as priorities, opportunity to improve, and minor or future issues. And then we give preliminary recommendations. So when we were here last time in February, we met with folks and had the public meeting to identify those, and then met with the staff the following day to really begin to prioritize those. So where we are now is the goals and objectives. So within the key issues matrix, you have the different categories: improving facilities and amenities. These were what we heard from the combination of the focus groups, survey, level of service, and those and the visioning session. And so implementing the Jennings Park site-specific master plan was a very popular discussion point in that phase 1 and phase 2, and looking for alternative ways to help fund some of those, bring existing facilities into compliance with ADA, maintain and improve existing facilities at parks, trails, and open spaces, and then increase the availability of indoor recreation space at the recreation center. I heard a lot about the recreation center and just the limited time availability for some of the programming opportunities that the public have been asking for. So the category of improved facilities and amenities. Then we go into the organizational and operational efficiencies and really taking a dive at the staffing and how the organization is operating itself, and looking at the process of evaluating the athletic program and really seeing what that looks like. Whether or not we had a lot of those meetings, we had a lot of the youth athletic organizations participating, and then heard from their standpoint as well as the information that was provided to us from the county and what the existing programs are. So evaluate how effective is the county at running youth athletics or athletics in general. Reevaluate and update the mission and vision statement for the department. Improve partnerships within higher leadership levels and political officials and alternative providers. So making sure that communication piece is open. We had some conversations about who should help lead that effort, in, especially at the quality of life initiatives, and Parks and Recreation seems to be the one at the table for a lot of those types of opportunities with health and wellness already, and continuing to improve that, and then improving countywide distribution of information and how that's distributed, whether it be social media, whether it be email. So for the department to really kind of streamline their efforts. And then maintaining staffing levels and positions that are aligned with your current operational demands or whatever those operational demands might be moving forward. Under the programs and service delivery category, once again, we're talking about the athletic challenges and addressing whether or not moving forward rules and policy analysis, and then improving the health and wellness of the entire county through additional programs and events, or creating a process to really weigh which of those events are more important over others or more successful over others. Add and enhance the special events, monitor participation in existing programs, facilities, and services. Developing and improving site access and connectivity to and from the rec center. That's a service delivery concept. And then improving and expanding Iredell's pedestrian, bicycle, and trail infrastructure overall, and increasing park amenities such as the splash park, considering there was discussion in a few different meetings down the road, nothing short-term or in need of now, but some type of an athletic complex that would help create tourism, or as well as additional opportunities for economic impacts within the county itself, and destination places, spaces within the northern part of the county. On the financial side of the key issues that were identified, the recommendation comes forward to really review existing fees and maybe restructure some of those to meet current situations. A pay-to-play concept, explore additional funding options that would be available, whether that be a bond referendum, whether that be tax at some point, discussion about any type of a tax change, grant funding, philanthropic opportunities, increasing partnerships within organizations. So you've got other recreation departments throughout the county. How can there be more collaboration rather than just the county providing one of those services within your area or within their area itself? And then explore the development and implementing of a cost recovery and resource allocation philosophy for the department. So that's a very successful program that can be done, where it's really showing you what those key important things are within your community, as well as the funding mechanisms for that come from, the county itself to determine the importance or to what percentage the county is willing to fund anything. So that's certainly an opportunity to consider down the road as well. So now the next steps. You all have the first draft, or the draft, the final of where we are today in the plan. And we would like to have the final delivery of the document to you as soon as possible. So pending any additional questions that you guys might have. And I'd like to address my comment. Let me backtrack just a minute about what I said in reference to Mecklenburg County. So
I'm having fun with it.
It's okay. Well,
To explain, I was having fun.
You got it. Okay, that's fine. It's a true atmosphere within your county. So it's a true family atmosphere of opportunity moving forward for you. And I have some closing remarks. I did want to go back to one more thing, right? The comment section that you all had the link to the comments for the plan I don't know if anybody tried to do that or not, but in order to be able to edit the PDF or make any comments, we are adding within the document information about the Carolina Thread Trail, their master plan, which the county commissioners had approved back in 2006, I think it was, or 8. So that was one area that we wanted to make sure was added into the plan. So that'll be one revision. It'll just be noted that master plan is been evaluated as part of this plan process. And then we'll probably add the map itself into the document of the thread trail.
Yeah, and for the record, we need to also include specific references to participating in the Iredell County Master Transportation Plan. A good deal of the funding that is available for bicycling and walking trails and such comes from federal government via the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. So if you don't have a plan, you don't have any funding.
Right.
So connecting to the regional Carolina Thread Trail, to the extent we can use that to connect our own facilities, then we need to have that articulated and laid out.
Sure. And that's, part of those recommendations with the collaboration. And those plans, those transportation plans, those pedestrian plans, all the other plans in surrounding municipalities, all should be, everybody, you guys need to be at the table for so much of that. And I'm sure your MPO person is, your transportation folks are. But certainly, yes, those are important reference pieces, because our objective is not for this document to just sit on a shelf and to collect dust. My closing would say that, you have a strong team. You've got a strong team with great skills, and they're ready to, to move forward. And if it has to be a slow pace, it's a slow pace. You have to be able to do what, you're able to do. You all, I commend you for having the vision to be able to move forward with this plan, and for us to be here tonight to gain your support and approval, in hopes that the county residents will do the same as you move forward. So thank you for the opportunity, and please let me know if you have any questions. Yes, sir.
I have several. In my opinion, with, recreation being closely tied to economic growth, development, health and well-being, what our challenges are that we look at when you mention per capita funding and things, we work with the schools and different things. So what our challenges are in your role, and you're working with other counties and different areas, states, whatever, what kind of ideas can you give us towards, dedicated revenue streams? I mean, we could look at, a portion of ad valorem, or we could look at a referendum towards recreation of some sort. But do you have any ideas with what you've looked at that would help us? Because we're looking down the road of how to have a dedicated revenue stream for several things that are important to us as far as growth to the county.
Right.
But that's our challenge is moving forward with a dedicated revenue stream and convincing our population, being as diverse as it is, north to south, east to west, that it is a positive thing to invest in recreation, and why.
Right. So what I would say to that is, certainly it's at the climate of your taxpayers, right, to a certain degree. But the key word in discussion, and even going back to our meetings in February, was sustainability and sustainable funding sources, right?
Right.
So thinking in terms of that, a bond referendum, you can create facilities and build facilities, but you got to be able to operate those moving forward, right? And how do you create that sustainable funding source for something like that versus grants, short term again.
That's good for helping with some tangible.
That's right. So
how many counties, sorry to interrupt you, work closely or develop a revenue stream funding plan working with their municipalities within the county, the schools, public-private partnerships. What do you see in that realm of that collaboration?
Honestly, I can't pinpoint anything, but I would probably say the strongest. There are counties and cities that have done a sales tax, a percentage of sales tax to help create that dedicated source of funding. Certainly, that's an option, and in having that in parks and recreation is almost a selling point because it's a quality of life issue, and it's not going back to the residents necessarily. It's a sales tax opportunity, right? So you're looking at it from that perspective. That could be a viable source, a sustainable funding source for you to consider moving down the road.
I just didn't know in your process, were you able to identify some of those things, or with your experience?
We heard different. We heard, of course, nobody wants to raise taxes, but the sales tax option is only, as you all know, is only incurred by someone who's purchasing something, or visitors to your community, or hotel motel tax. I know you.
A lot of counties, like you said, when they have pay to play, they have different sports and different types of things, whether it's gyms or softball, soccer fields, et cetera. An original investment, which it would require, but our people and taxpayers, from our perspective, would want to know what's our payback time.
Right.
How does it pay back? Does it pay back? Then we convince, I think, our taxpayers, our public-private partnerships, to play with us and to work with us towards those goals. But it requires a sales pitch that is, factual, truthful, and has a true end game. What can you get for your money? How does it help you? Hotel taxes? It doesn't particularly pertain to us, but travel. All of the different things that could come to the county and help all of us, that's what we would need to know, is how that impacts us.
Yeah, I think what I would recommend is, there's, as I mentioned in this process, is the resource allocation. So you look at that, and it takes a really deep dive into your revenue sources that are available, your existing budget, your CIP plan, county budget overall. I'm not here to give you a sales pitch to sell you another service or anything like that. I'm just saying that there are different ways that you can look at the concept of really what those true, meaningful opportunities are for the county, if that helps. The pay-to-play, in my previous career as a recreation professional back in Burlington, our revenue was about 39% of our overall operating budget. So we were a pay-to-play city, and they still are, actually. So obviously, if the services are warranted, I think that's something that the county would have to decide to move forward on in order to generate some of those funding sources. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions?
I just make a statement real quick. First of all, I direct my comments to Michelle. We've come a long way since the recreation director, their motto was play ball, right? And the answer to every problem was take another lap. I'd like to just share, if I could, confession is good for the soul. Reading this report and participating part of the study, and then getting some briefings from Michelle during this process really changed my outlook a lot on how I viewed recreation. I would say that my outlook was skewed based upon my own personal experiences of if you're going to categorize people, as a baby boomer with two millennial sons. My focus and my vision of good recreation was practice fields more convenient to homes and ball fields where to play games on the weekends. Man, if you could fix those, you certainly achieved my vision of a really good recreation plan. And understanding what the generational differences and challenges are was very eye-opening to read, and also taking the existing facilities and saying this is where we are, and then looking to, okay, where do we go next? I think put this plan, one that was kind of founded on some reality, as opposed to, well, if we could start life all over again and, money fell from the sky like manna from heaven, we would do these $3 trillion worth of Nancy Pelosi moves. The challenges, I think some of the challenges that you mentioned, we cannot, I can't overemphasize the challenges that come when you have 1.8 or 2% growth. It is really hard to fund things for people who haven't started paying taxes yet. With schools, that multiplier is a budget breaker. And recreation always will take a second seat to education. That's a huge challenge that we always face. And then and I would say the other part of it was a couple of your slides. You said 41% of the people wanted this and 42%. And I'm just picking at that one slide. I know there's a lot of data in here, but that kind of goes into the word funding stream. As somebody who's been in the political process for 20 years, do you know what a funding stream is? It's a stream that flows through somebody else's wallet, not mine. And that's the trouble that we have. When people want a dedicated funding stream, the word dedicated, just substitute the word somebody else's pocket. And the challenge that we have is that our funding stream is going to go through people's wallets. And that is way easier said than done. Well, one of the challenges that you brought on, and I know that Ms. Heffler and I have discussed this many times before, but so the mentions of north versus south on facilities, I'll just say that the population density in the southern part of the county is very high, and there's always going to be competing differences between putting the facilities where the people are and have them look like they appear dispersed amongst a geographic area. So that's always a challenge we're going to have to deal with. I'd like to just wrap up and say that as an engineer, I like when people take a very quantitative, analytical look at where we are, how do we get here, and where do we go. And this, I think this study and this plan incorporated all of that, and it was long, but it was thorough, and I think that that's the kind of approach that was called for, as opposed to a commissioner who just wanted his kids to be able to go to practice a little bit closer to the house. So in that, I think you were very successful. So, Mr. Chairman, that ends my comments, and if we want to give it to Mr. Norman, that would be appropriate.
Well, I need to get a lick in, too. Let me just say that thank you so much, Lisa, for all that you brought and your team. I've had discussions over the last couple, 3 years with Michelle about, our recreation department is an inflection point. It's either going to do kind of what it's been doing, and we're just going to have very limited growth and ability to respond to expectations that people have versus taking it to the next level. And to take it to the next level, as Commissioner Robertson has been alluding to, you really needed a good, objective, data-driven analysis and vision. And I think that you all have, in conjunction with interested citizens, some that were perhaps not so interested, it was interesting to see how little people knew about the programs that are offered. It's not just the parks, but the programs. There's a significant amount of programming that this department does, and it's well subscribed to. But the people that know about it, they're the people that participate in it. And everybody else is clueless. And then there's the confusion between, well, what's a park with Mooresville or Statesville, and whose is that? And that's why we have to take a big picture, holistic look at an inventory of the entire community's assets so that we're not duplicating, with a scarce funding stream. Just as a point of reference, though, within the last 5 years, today we have something like, 6 actual parks, and I think there were only 2 5 years ago. There was Stumpy Creek, and there's Scotts and Rosenwald, and those are the only 2, and Scotts Rosenwald was a community center. That was about it. Today, we have Big Leaf Slopes, bike trail that was a great public-private partnership between the folks that love riding bikes and those bike shops, and getting out there and literally putting their shoulder to the wheel, clearing the paths and building those things at a great savings to the taxpayer. Jennings Park. We had some land up north of North Iredell High School, and it sat there for, 10 years maybe? Nothing happening for anything really in the northern end of the county. So putting together with the donation from Sertoma of the ball fields, and then purchasing adjacent properties and coming up with a master plan and getting some great grants written by our own staff, that's on the map. But it's an incrementalist approach in terms of building the capacity and the capability of that vision. The Iredell County Recreation Center, well, what a great opportunity, and one that we happen to have the ability, since we were going to spend the dollars anyway at East Iredell Lions Club that had been donated. We needed a place for our recreational staff, and we were able to shift the funds from that build out of that one small building to purchase a really, I won't say world class, but I'll say a countywide asset that, as you can see from the number of people that are using it, is much appreciated. So, we've been able to do a lot of things on a shoestring, but as has been alluded to, you can't build them out programmatically, and you can't actually provide all the potential unless you have some form of a dedicated funding stream. And that's the challenge that we have, and that's what we're going to have to wrestle with and make the case for. There's a process of evaluating any goal or objective that you have that's used in many organizations. I know in the military, it's ends, ways, and means, and it's a three-legged stool, and all 3 legs of the stool have to be the same length in order for the stool to be stable. Nobody's buying stools out there, 3-legged stools that have two legs that are 3 feet long and 1 leg that's a foot long. There's no market for that. Well, the ends is the objectives, and you've laid out a great moonshot for us. How do we get where we can optimally deliver services? So that's the ends. The ways are the how you do it, and you've laid that out in particularity in a great amount of detail. What we've already alluded to here is the means, the funding stream, that funding leg. Because if you're only going to have a foot-long funding leg, you're going to have to cut 2 feet off of both the other legs to have a stable platform. So people will have to understand that you get what you pay for. And if it's that important, and I believe it is important for our economic development, it's a quality of life issue, and it's frequently cited as one of the reasons companies locate in Iredell County is because it's a great place to raise a family. But people have certain expectations, and those expectations are almost sort of a given. And sometimes they're surprised that we don't have that level of offerings. So we need to figure out what's achievable, trim the goals and how we do it, but figure out how we're going to pay for it. And that's for a lengthy series of discussions in the future. But we thank you for setting the table for us. I'll ask Marvin, would you like to make a motion to adopt and approve the master plan as it's been presented?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Commissioner Norman, who, by the way, is our longstanding commissioner representative on the the Recreational Advisory Committee.
Just for the record, Mr. Norman, is it possible to just make sure that your motion includes amending based on the comments that we received with the when we circulated the draft, just to make sure we can include that comment with the thread trail?
Mr. Norman, can your motion include all the comments and feedback that they got during the discussions about this master plan?
As long as James don't have to repeat it.
Okay. Is that what you need?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Motion has been made by Commissioner Norman. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously, and thank you very much, Lisa and Michelle.
And please, you have my contact information. I'm happy to be a resource moving forward. We'll be back up here in the future working with Statesville on a project. So thank you all. It's been a great.
Well, check in on us.
Will the clerk to the board please make a note that was passed unanimously by 5 hip and cool commissioners?
We may get people calling in and calling us on.
There'll be some arguments about that, right?
Okay, well, that's for a public.
Sounds like my wife and kids.
All lines are lighting up. Oh, no.
Okay.
He did light up, really.
Do we need to take a break for anybody?
I'm good.
Oh, okay. We'll move on then. The first item on our administrative calendar was a request from Emergency Medical Services to proclaim May 17th through 23rd, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week. And we've pulled that off of the consent agenda. Instead, we're going to deal with that as a standalone item. It seems like this rolls around a lot faster. It seems like it was 6 months ago. But that when you're going downhill, I guess time goes faster. I guess I fall in that category. The EMS folks are frequently in our discussions and in our prayers as they respond across the length and breadth of the county, and in particular during the COVID-19 pandemic response, they were on the tip of the spear as far as being able to render aid under circumstances which at the time was very confusing and murky and a little bit scary. But they handled all those responses with amazing professionalism, continue to respond and as we've dealt from the beginning with shortages of PPE, they have adapted and overcome and figured out how to get gowns, for instance, that could be laundered and reused multiple times, as well as the appropriate masks and all, to be used when appropriate. So We want to especially reach out and thank those folks who work for EMS. And I'm going to read a background on Emergency Medical Services Week proclamation to designate the week of May 17 to 23, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical service teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services have grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventive medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine, and whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. This is a very big tent. Whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and in continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills, and whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. I would now ask if there is a motion to approve this proclamation.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to designate the week of May 17th through 23 of 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week. These folks are the people who have their hands to the plow. And it's my honor to make this motion, sir.
Motion by Vice Chairman Bowles. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Therefore, the Iredell County Board of Commissioners, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 17th through 23rd, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week with the theme, Ready Today, Preparing for Tomorrow. I encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. This, the 18th day of May 2020 by the Iredell County Board of Commissioners. It is hereby adopted.
Chairman, it's the 19th, sir.
Is it the 19th? All right. Okay. Thank you very much. And we will now move on to the consent agenda, and we'll handle this like our normal consent process. And at this time, Ms. Jones, if you would please review the items on the consent agenda.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Mallory. The first item is a request from Emergency Medical Services for approval of budget amendment number 33 to appropriate funds provided by Partners Behavioral Health. This is a non-matching grant in the amount of $2,791 coming from Partners, and it is for the purpose of purchasing Narcan for our first responders within our volunteer fire departments. It will be on a reimbursement basis, so we purchase it and then they will reimburse us for that.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Consent?
Consent.
Thank you. The next item is a request from Emergency Management for approval of budget amendment number 32 to accept a 14-foot enclosed trailer as part of a Domestic Preparedness Region 7 project to equip counties for increased sheltering capabilities. The only cost for this for the county going forward is to tag and insure the trailer annually. This is a $5,000 grant, and it will help us complete our sheltering project. And the trailer will be used to hold cots, blankets, and pillows that were purchased in last year's budget cycle through the Dipper Region 7 grant program.
Any questions or comments? Consent?
Consent.
Those things will not go bad and mildew in a trailer?
We will use those in our practice exercises and things of that nature, and when we do, we will make sure that they are cleaned appropriately and maintained appropriately. The next item is a request from Emergency Management for approval of Budget Amendment Number 34 and to accept an Emergency Management Performance Grant, Supplemental EMPGS, which is in the amount of $12,696 to support response efforts due to COVID-19. This is a 50-50 match grant, and Emergency Management will use existing salaries and general fund already budgeted line items as that in-kind match. This is a one-time grant program to allow emergency management to purchase materials, equipment, and supplies to support response for COVID-19, which could be PPE, things of that nature. The funds will be used to enhance our virtual emergency operations program. This is something, if you remember, I know Chairman Mallory, I'm looking at you because you've participated in the Web EOC and the EOC activation several times. This will allow us to update that software, and we have actually already started using that software for internal communications and tracking of PPE resources and things that different departments are doing as a response of COVID-19. So no additional costs will be incurred by the county with this grant.
Any questions or comments? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you. We have a theme here. The next request is from Emergency Management for approval to accept a Tier 2 hazardous materials grant in the amount of $5,000 to provide funding for a joint hazardous materials exercise with Mooresville Fire and Rescue, Statesville Fire Department, and Statesville Regional Airport. This is a $5,000 grant, and there is no match for that grant.
Questions or comments? Consent?
Consent.
The next item is a request from Emergency Management for approval to accept a Tier 2 hazardous materials grant in the amount of $1,000 to help support the local emergency planning committee. Again, this is a $1,000 grant. It is an annual non-competitive grant that offsets the cost of supporting the local emergency planning committee, and it's focused on Tier 2 hazardous materials sites throughout the county.
Questions? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you. This is the last item for Emergency Management, I promise. The next item is a request from Emergency Management for formal adoption of the Iredell Rowan Hazard Mitigation Plan 2020 as updated. The updates to this plan, this is a multi-page plan, it's 706 pages. The updates to this plan are statistical updates, so it's going through and updating the statistics from the previous plan. What this plan does, the document outlines the most probable hazardous scenarios facing our region, along with mitigation strategies to assist Iredell County in preparing for and recovering quickly from those events. I will say that this is paid for by the state of North Carolina, and it is a requirement.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Is that mainly for weather-related?
It could be any type of hazardous mitigation. For example, if a truck is driving down Interstate 40 or 77 and has a chemical spill, if they're carrying hazardous materials, things of that, it could be for anything that's a hazardous material type response.
Okay.
The next item is a request from Planning and Development to consider calling for a public hearing on June the 2nd, 2020 in regards to text amendments to the Land Development Code. This is something that was sent to the Planning Board, and it is regarding the solar amendments to our Land Development Code. The Planning Board did meet. They made various revisions to the text amendment and voted 6-3 on February the 5th to recommend approval. It came before the board, and the board referred that to the Economic Development Task Force. That task force met, went through the plan, and it has come out of that task force with a positive recommendation back to the board. And this is just to schedule the public hearing for those text amendments regarding the solar solar facilities in Iredell County, and that would be to set the public hearing on June the 2nd at 7 p.m.
Any questions? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Marvin, I didn't hear you.
Marvin, you go with consent on that, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, he's good.
The next item is a request from the Finance Department for approval and adoption of a resolution for electronic auction of county-owned property located at 204 Bluefield Road in Mooresville. And I'm going to refer this to Mr. Dean Lill to walk you through the process.
But before we dive into that very much, I don't think we ought to try to sell it right now.
It doesn't bind us. You can get an offer. You don't like the offer, we don't have to accept it. And I think Dean can address it.
Okay.
You already turned down one.
Yeah, I just didn't want to get real wrapped around the axle because this thing said we're going to open it up for 60 days or 90 days or whatever it is. This isn't the best time to sell. All right, go for it.
Good evening, gentlemen. As Chairman did say, in 2019, the board did consider an offer to buy the property. We turned that offer down and decided to hold on to the property for a while. Early this year, Ms. Jones asked me to look into the possibility of auctioning this on GovDeals or look into better options to sell the property. I did meet briefly with our GovDeals rep. They were very excited about the prospect. They made us an offer or a proposal to electronically advertise and market our property and electronically auction it. And they're going to reduce their standard fee from 12.5% to 5% to allow more folks to gain interest in that property. We've used GovDeals a lot in the last several years to sell some of the properties that we acquire, some of the smaller properties. It's been very successful. Some of the cases we brought in a little more than we expected and hoped for. And there'd be some advantages to using GovDeals to at least attempt to auction this property through their offering. Some of those advantages would be there is no contract. We do not have to sign anything to be able to do this. There's no exclusive listing as there would be with a real estate contract, and there's no follow-up obligations if there's no sale completed. If the property does not close, we owe them nothing. Regardless of the reason for it not closing, we can relist the property at auction as many times as we'd like to try to gain market exposure down the road if we do not like that initial offer, if you do not like that initial offer. And we can continue to try to get that best acceptable bid and buyer. We could drop them and move on to another option if we choose to. And at the close of the auction, there is only one auction process in this. There is no follow-up auction as if we were to use the initial offer and upset bid procedure. So this will be a one-time auction once it's closed. The GovDeals will collect the bid deposit from the bidder. They'll hold on to it until the board either accepts or rejects the bidder and the high bid. If the board accepts the high bid, then they'll turn the funds over to us for us to hold, and then we'll start the process for closing the sale. If you reject it, and you always have that option to a final rejection of the high bid for the property. So regardless of how that bid comes in, whether it comes in as a good high bid or a low high bid, when I bring that to you, you have the option to accept or reject it. And then there is no recourse or any follow-up needed to be after that point. So you always have that option. If you do approve the process, going forward, of course, the board must adopt a resolution. The requirements of the bid and sale of the property are included within the resolution and would have to be published. If you do approve and adopt the resolution, this week I will place a 30-day ad to allow local residents to know that we are selling the property, give them an opportunity to look at it, and also to meet the statutory requirement. Once that 30 days expires, the auction will start on or after June the 24th, and it'll continue for 60 days to give that maximum national exposure that would give this property the attention it deserves. And also the auctions auto extend. So if you get down to that last hour and there's a lot of auctioning going on, a lot of bidding going on, you can't have that bidder do that one last second jab. All right? If that thing happens within a certain number of seconds within closing, it'll automatically extend to give additional folks an opportunity. All right? So that can extend for quite a while. But that is a good feature to auctioning at Gov Deals. One of the suggestions that Commissioner Bowles made was that a buyer may have some issues trying to meet all the requirements and inspections needed within a short due diligence period. So it was suggested that we extend the due diligence period to 180 days. During that 180 days, it's up to them and on their cost to make sure that they get any inspections they need done, completed, and ready to go. At the end of the due diligence period, they'll have an additional 90 days to close the sale. As far as the bid deposit is concerned, if the buyer backs out, if they find out it's not a property they want, and they do back out, then the county will keep 1% of that total bid deposit. Excuse me, it'll be 1% of the total bid from that deposit. Okay? If they do not step out of the buy at the end of the due diligence period and they move into the closing period, if they back out at that point, they lose the entirety of their bid deposit. And just as a final note on this, we do request that the board do approve this resolution and allow us to move forward if it be your will. But as a final note, along with the request for approval and adoption of the resolution, we're also requesting some input and discussion from the board as to setting a reserve or a minimum bid start bid. You're not required to set either. You can also decide what you want. I can set it. It does not have to be disclosed at auction. All right. So we do not have to do that. There are advantages and disadvantages to either doing it or not doing it. But regardless, please keep in mind that regardless of how the bid does turn out, you always have that final right of refusal and rejection of the bid and choice to move into a different direction. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you have regarding the process.
Well, sort of to Commissioner Robertson's point, to an extent, the time you're talking about starting in June 24th, run through August 24th, in terms of a 60-day bid process, well, that is right in the middle of the transition between whatever phase 2 and whatever phase 3 may look like, and there's going to be, I think, a fair amount of unsettled market quandary there, and I wonder if we can approve this, but delay the date to start this marketing or the auction process to sometime in the late summer or early fall or whatever, when we have a little more clarity on the overall economic situation, not only in the country but the state.
Second.
Is that?
I'm okay for mid-July, just push it back 30 days.
The question that you have to ask here is the market better now, or is the market going to be better in 9 months? That is a question we don't know the answer to right now. All of the housing markets, as far as buying and selling, people are still listing and people are still buying homes right now. Now, some developers out there do have some cold feet right now. I think some banks and lending institutions have some cold feet. But with the topography on this particular piece of property, a potential buyer is going to have to make the deal. Then he's going to have to get the entitlements on it, go through the Mooresville planning and zoning hoops, jump through those. And then that's going to take a while to get that done. So the question is it better 60 days from now to sell this piece of property? Is it better now, or is it better a year from now? It's going to be a year before you're going to be able to close on this piece of property, because it's going to take that long for somebody, whomever is the prospective buyer, to be able to get their entitlements and get their stuff together. If I'm not badly mistaken, to the end of the due diligence period, I think it's 5 p.m. on the date of the due diligence period, a buyer can walk for any or no reason.
Yes, sir.
You have built some safety nets in here that it would be a 1% and then a 5% at a different date. So that is something to where he would have some skin in the game, but it's going to take somebody who buys this particular piece of property and tries to develop it. They're going to have a lot of A&E in this to get it to that point. So,
Yes, sir.
This is not just something where you buy it and you move in the next day. It's going to take a while to get this property ready to develop, if that's their intentions. I don't know whom the prospective buyer would be. Maybe it's somebody who just wants to buy it and hold the property.
And to address Commissioner Robertson's concern and question, when I write the process for these, if you notice, I'm not stating that the bid will start at 12 noon on June the 24th. It'll start on or after June the 24th. So that gives us some room. I always put that in there to build some contingency in case something happens with advertisement, in case something happens. However, I do want to bring this up, that is built for maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks. If the board has concerns about marketing the property, setting it out to auction, it would best not to rely on that statement, even though we can push that out quite a ways. It might be better to consider postponing the bid. However, I do have that built in. If your concern is maybe up to a month, I think we could probably work with that and not release the bid until a later date.
Due to the fact that the board can turn down any offer, is there a reason to set a reserve? Because if we can turn down any offer, or do we set a reserve to where if it hits the reserve, then it's sold to the highest bidder from that point?
In the case of our selling, the board selling this property, in the case of a county selling that, since the board does have that last right of refusal, that rejection option, the reserve becomes a little less important as it would if you had an absolute auction.
Right.
All right. So in this case, again, you are not required to set it. It is not an absolute necessity. And you can allow it to start at some. You can allow a low starting bid. Typically what happens is we set our starting bids low. During the last several days and sometimes the last several hours, the bidding gets pretty furious, and it drives that price up, and it usually ends up going higher than we expected. We have that a lot on the real estate that we've sold over the last several years. We started at the recommended value, usually tax value, and then let it go from that point, and it usually builds pretty quickly.
What does it look like? Let's say you decided to move it 30 days to Ken's point. They say you get a bidder, you accept the bid, you start to due diligence. To Tommy's point, Mooresville's process is not going to get done in that 180 days. Do we have the ability to extend that with the same? What happens then if you have a buyer but they can't get the A&E done with Mooresville in the appropriate 180 days?
They're going to start once a person bids this off and we accept their offer. They're going to start with their engineering immediately, I'm sure.
You think 180 is enough?
I think they'll have a good direction of where it's going.
Regardless of the reason, if we accept the offer, regardless of the reason they're not done in 180 days to go toward the 90 additional days to close, then that still defaults, is my point.
At that point, your 1% and your 5% will come into play depending on the date.
It would come into play, but I think...
I'm saying, is that enough time if you've got people putting money into an A&E, if you've got a serious buyer? That's my question, I guess.
I think that's typical in the market.
Is that?
It is typical in real estate, in most normal real estate transactions, and we've tried to design this. Over the years, we've worked on a couple of these, and we've tried to design this to accommodate the bid process, but then kind of segue that into a real estate transaction. In a normal real estate transaction, if the buyer is not able to finish everything within the due diligence, they can extend that to a certain point. I think the board would probably have that option. I do not know what the steps would be. We've never gotten to that point, but I'm sure that the board would have that option at that point, that far into the sales process.
To Ken's point, ordinarily, you would be able to get your A&E done and your entitlements to the property done, but with the COVID-19 and the public hearings and stuff like that, it's a little more challenging right now.
I agree.
What's that look like, Lisa, if you have any input on that?
Without double checking, I would be a little bit concerned about your ability to just grant an extension because the terms of the bid process include the due diligence and the closing.
Right.
So you're changing those down the road versus if this were done as a normal real estate transaction and we just entered into a contract and then you could change those terms, that's a different situation than these conditions being built into the bid package in the beginning. So I don't know if it would be as simple as just amending the contract down the road with this process.
I'm good with it if y'all are. I mean, since we have refusal, I mean, whatever y'all want to do.
And I would add to Dean's point that if you're hesitant about the June 24th date or how much time out, it would probably be best to just bring this resolution back closer to the date you all are ready to start, rather than there being too much time after the June 24th date before he actually pulls the trigger.
There again, like I say, we're talking about, we don't know how much damage has been done to the economy because of all the shutdown. In 9 months, we will know how much damage has been done to this economy. So the question is do we take a chance on go ahead and take it to market now and salvage that the economy is still, that the market is still good, or take a chance that it will be worse 9 months from now? If we accept that bid, and if it's something we can live with and we accept that bid, then we move on forward. If we decline that bid, we can always come back and redo this process at a later date, correct?
Correct.
I think it's prudent to start a little bit later than June 24th. I think banks, lending institutions, and everybody else, even restarting some of the required due diligence, the folks that provide those services are probably going to be backed up as the economy starts to open up because they haven't been doing much of anything. And I think it just may give us a little bit more, I think it may be a more advantageous 30 to 45 day wait than right now with so many uncertainties. I mean, I would feel a little more comfortable just with that length of a delay. And if that means coming back, that's best.
I think that would be best if you're talking 30 to 40 days past the June 24th date. So perhaps maybe just say even at the next meeting, if you have a better feel for it.
Say let's bring it back up middle of July.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good with that.
I'm good.
Okay.
Mr. Norman, you good with that? Bring it back up in mid-July to do later?
I'm fine.
Thank you.
Well, let's plan on that then. All right.
Thank you, Dean.
Good.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night.
Yeah, and it's a great contract. It's a great process that you've laid out for us.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
I want to get the best timing. Now, shall we just consent to put that on the 15 July, not the 15, the
July
second
21st.
meeting of July?
It'll be July the 21st. Yes, sir.
Consent on that?
Consent.
Sam?
Okay. The next item is presentation of the second reading of amendments to the personnel ordinance. If you'll remember at our last meeting, Ms. Gregory was present and went through the amendments to the Iredell County personnel ordinance that were reviewed at both the fall and winter retreats. According to the board rules and procedure, ordinances must receive approval from all members of the Board of Commissioners. If proposed ordinance is approved by a majority of those voting, but not all members of the board, it shall be considered at the next regular meeting of the board. We did have one board member that was not able to attend the last meeting, so we're bringing this back for a second reading and vote by the board.
Any questions or comments? Consent?
Consent.
Consent.
Mr. Norman, you go with consent?
I said consent.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The next item is a request from the Iredell County Economic Development Corporation for approval to amend the Cheney Brothers LLC Economic Development Incentive Agreement and to extend the May 1st, 2020 deadline, to extend the May 1st, 2020 deadline for Yanjan USA to execute its economic incentive agreement. And Jen Bosser and Chris Younger are on the telephone to make this request.
Thank
you, Beth. This is Jen Bozer with Iredell Economic Development Corporation, here to bring forth these two requests. The first request is to extend the deadline for Yanjan to execute the Economic Development Incentive Agreement. Yanjan executed its economic incentive on April 29th, 2020. Which exceeded the 150-day extension granted to the company on July 16th, 2019. The economic incentive was originally approved following a public hearing on December 19th, 2017. So we would like to request approval from the Board of Commissioners to extend the deadline to May 1st, 2020 for Yanjan USA company officials to execute that agreement.
Any questions on Yanjan? Consent on that matter?
Consent.
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 Okay.
Thank you. The second request is to amend an economic incentive agreement for Cheney Brothers. Cheney Brothers was approved for an incentive on November 21st, 2017 in the amount of $465,000 over 5 years. Based on a minimum assessed value of $18 million. The anticipated range of that investment was $20 to $24 million between November 30th for an improvement period between November 30th of 2017 to November 30th of 2022 and the creation of 105 new jobs. On July 16th, 2019, the Board of Commissioners approved a 150-day extension to complete and fully execute the incentive agreement. The agreement was executed on November 22nd, 2019, with a stated minimum investment threshold of $20 million and a stated minimum assessment threshold, or what we consider the increase in the value to the tax base of $20 million to begin the incentive payments. So on this, we actually have two requested amendments to the incentive agreement. The agenda request item that was sent out last week has changed. Cheney Brothers is not requesting an amendment to the reduction of the threshold stated for their investment. They have indicated that they fully intend to meet the investment threshold of $20 million or greater. What we have recognized is in reviewing the contract, we believe that the assessed value threshold or the increase in the value of the tax base should be amended from $20 million to $3 million. And this request is consistent with the contracts that have been executed since this one was executed and is in line with the county's incentive policy, which requires a minimum value of $1 million in an increase in the value of the tax base for existing industry expansion and $3 million for new industry expansion. So that's the first request, is to amend the contract to change the assessed value threshold from $20 million to $3 million. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to
let's just go ahead and
that one
questions on
first?
that portion. Okay. Consent?
Consent on that portion.
Consent on that.
Consent.
All right, go ahead on the
Okay.
second one.
The second request for amendment is the company has indicated they have met the investment threshold of at least $20 million. So they've made the investment. Their improvement period is not over until November of 2022, but they've already made the investment. They were well on their way to meeting the 105 jobs, but have experienced a setback with COVID-19. They have currently created 98 jobs, although some of those sales positions are remote, with at least 80 of those jobs being located at the Statesville facility. They still fully anticipate meeting the 105 jobs by the end of the improvement period of November 2022, or exceeding that job number. Due to COVID, they would like to ask the Board of Commissioners if they would consider an amendment to the jobs requirement so they could request an earlier payment. Their request is for the current contract terms. With the current contract, the terms were $20 million minimum investment and 105 jobs. They're requesting to amend the contract to be 80 jobs, for them to create 80 jobs by May 15th, 2020, and allow the company to receive a full payout and give the company an additional 18 months to get to the 105 jobs, still by November 2022. If the company does not meet the 105 jobs, the Board of Commissioners could consider a prorated payout based on the actual jobs created.
Have we ever amended, after an agreement's made, the requirements to the original amendments? Because I'm worried about a precedent that we would set. I mean, if they can still have the threshold of 105, would that not be a better incentive for them to reach that as soon as possible? What do y'all think?
I think if you prorate the other end of it, it's going to take you to where you need to be.
And if I may just add, you really have, on the job portion, you really have two options. If you allow them to go ahead and draw down the incentive when they hit the 80, with the understanding that they still have to meet that 105 and pay them that full incentive. If they don't meet the 105, then there's some type of clawback provision for that. Or you could do, when they hit the 80, you can begin paying in a prorated, you can prorate it until they hit that 105. So you have a couple of different options. Typically, we've gone that option, the avenue of prorating, to avoid the clawback, because that's not positive to do. But you could do it either way, but typically we've gone the avenue of prorating.
I'm okay with the 80 threshold if we do the prorated as they go, instead of having to do a clawback. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's appropriate to do that. Understand, it's not changing the ultimate number.
No, it's not changing. It's just lowering their threshold to start a payment.
Recognizing that in the unusual circumstances of COVID-19, this particular, as you know, Cheney Brothers supplies restaurants.
Sure.
So.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're flexing with.
So I think this is a flexible.
But one of the options that we are considering, though, is to change the wording so that the full incentive, as if the full incentive had been predicated upon reaching 80 instead of 105 jobs.
Yeah, but then you would have to have the clawback.
No.
Yes, you would.
Yeah.
If they do not meet the 105.
If you just change it, if you change
do away with the 105.
Say instead of 105, it should just be 80.
And not hold them to the 105?
105 is out the door. You changed it to 80. There is no 105.
105, she said, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong.
105 is what the original agreement.
We're keeping that threshold as a full deal, but we're starting a prorated payout at 80.
Isn't what they're asking is to amend the original deal?
Is that what you're asking, Jen, is do away with 105 and make it 80 for full payout?
That's what that would be asking. A preference by the company, yes.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's appropriate. I think that 105 is the agreement. How they get paid out, they've got the first 80 get paid for that, and pro rata up to whatever point they get to.
So the pro rata is actually a midpoint between what they wanted and what they would have eventually gotten. Right. So if that's the case, then I think that should be our recommendation.
Did you hear that, Jim?
Can you say it again? Sorry.
What we're saying is we're willing to start a pro rata payout at 80 and still hold them to the 105 threshold for full payment.
Okay. Well, I think that still gives the company the ability to get paid out early.
It does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they hit 80, they start getting paid based on that pro rata proportion, and then they have the ability when they hit 105 to pay 100%.
Prorated due to a differential in jobs, because the property tax is set based upon valuation. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so if they only spent 80% of the money and created 80% of the jobs, I can see that proportionally they would get 80% of the incentive. But if they've invested 100% of the money but only got 80% of the jobs, what's the pro rata?
I'm going to defer that to our deputy county manager because she is the one that calculates our incentives to kind of walk you through.
Can I withdraw my questions?
The first one that we ever did this way was with Providencia, if you remember when that was built up on Highway 90. And we prorated the payment. If they created 80% of the jobs, they got 80% of the incentive. And we most recently did that with Project Control, I believe, Lisa, who did not meet the average wages, the number of jobs that they promised to do in their original presentation to the board and what was included in their agreement. So we reduced the annual payment by the percentage of jobs that they did not create.
So if they created 100% of the jobs but 80% of the tax base,
the incentive that was provided was and. It wasn't either or. It was X amount of assessed value and X number of jobs to receive payment.
So if it comes in less than what you
less than the investment,
you're not going to get any more than the assessed value.
But the number of jobs is just part of it.
I mean, the purpose of my question was for public consumption.
To understand.
Our incentives are there for jobs.
Correct.
Yes.
For tax base and jobs. That's correct.
Okay. But, I mean, what really drives this is the jobs. And that's why we're saying even if the financial part is met, but the jobs part isn't, then the incentive isn't going to be the same, because these incentives are to create jobs, to create above average paying jobs.
That was my point.
That's
jobs
correct.
are very important to us to be created with the incentive.
Yes.
With the tax incentive.
It's twofold. Yes.
Twofold, yeah.
We just have to realize that in this particular climate in the world today with this virus, we may have to adjust a little along if we value this company and want them to make that improvement. Yeah.
Correct.
And that's the amendment, giving them the
It's all
payout.
into precedent. Once you start going backwards and not holding people to what you agreed to, then where does that end? Which I think was the point that General Mallory was making, and I understand that. And so the prorated proposal is splitting the difference between you either met the threshold or you didn't, 0 or 100, and making some sort of adjustment.
All right, we'll start at 80 jobs. We'll start a pro rata payout till they hit 105, knowing for sure we value the company. But the twofold threshold for us is the creating the jobs for our citizens, and I know you get that, Jen. And so,
and the lesson learned here,
we don't want to set a precedent. Sorry.
Think about it. Whenever the guidance that we've given our economic development partners has been, if the company thinks that they're going to spend they're going to spend $10 million. I mean, more than once, we wrote the thing saying $10 million. They came in at $9,750,000 saying, hey, you know, and that's why we give them a window, you know, between $8 million and $12 million. If they think it's going to be 10, we give them a window. Maybe we do the same thing with the number of jobs. Give a window. Because I think we all have some degree of discomfort over the fact that they guessed 105 and they hit 80.
Okay, are we agreed?
I can do that.
So we're agreed that they reach the threshold of 80 and start a pro rata pay.
They start getting prorated.
Okay.
All right. Consent?
Consent.
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 You follow?
Thank you.
Did you hear all that, Jen?
I did.
Okay, Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, the next item is a request from Tax Administration for approval of April refunds and releases, and there are no commissioner names on this list.
Any questions, comments? No commissioners are on the bad list or anything? Okay. Consent?
Consent.
Thank you. The next item is a request from the clerk to the board for approval of minutes from the meeting on May 5th, 2020.
Okay. Is there any questions or corrections? Consent?
Consent.
And this concludes all of your items for the consent agenda.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Houck. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 9 is announcement of vacancies occurring on boards and commissions. Ms. Jones, would you like to run through those?
Absolutely. You have 3 appointments for the Animal Services Grievance Committee, 2 appointments for Centralina Workforce Development Board, 2 appointments Farmland Preservation Advisory Board, 1 appointment for the Eye Care Board of Directors, 5 appointments for Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, 1 appointment for Mitchell Community College Board of Trustees, 1 appointment for the Iredell County Social Services Board, and 1 appointment for the Troutman Board of Adjustment, EPJ.
Okay. As everyone's benefit, most of our board appointments are made on a semi-annual basis, and we would invite any interested citizen to go to our website and look at the different options available, the opportunities that are available, and to fill out an application if you're interested and get those submitted. And our next meeting, we will have a vote on filling the positions as they are outlined. Right. So there's no further action necessary other than that announcement. Appointments to boards and commissions. We have 1 appointment, the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. Right.
Yes, sir. And Ms. Jennifer Winters has volunteered to serve for the first time as the Parks and Recreation profession to fill that requirement on that board. This is not a board appointment. However, they have requested, as they have in the past, the board's blessing on this appointment.
All right, any questions or comments? Would someone like to make a motion for a blessing?
Motion for a blessing.
Okay. So
Giving out crown corn.
all in favor, please say aye.
Say amen.
All right, is there any unfinished business? This is it is a public comment period. I would ask if anyone has called in. Pardon?
Did you want to give a few minutes for someone to call in, or a few seconds, I should say?
I'll tell you what, we will just hold that. We'll have an open mic. People can call in, but we will proceed forward with business, put them on hold, and we'll circle back to their comment if they have any. Right. New business. Just a couple of items just in terms of our COVID-19 updates. We will have a update this week. Today, we hit the mark of 200 positive cases in the county that have been confirmed. And that breaks down based on the three general areas, north, central, and south. 37 in the northern part of the county. That's basically everything north of Interstate 40. The central part of the county, 70. The southern part of the county, 93. That is very close to the actual percentages of population distribution within the county. Over the last month, the greatest increase has been actually in the northern part of the county percentage-wise. It went from around 11% a month ago to 19%. And the southern end of the county went from about 62% down to 46%, and the central area of the county went from about 25% of the cases to 35%. But we're tracking really fairly closely with population per capita in all areas of the county, which just goes to show that it is equally distributed now. So,
equal distribution of misery. The main thing, I think, that is the main statistic is a total of 0.1% of people in the county have caught this virus.
Well, let me make
0.003% have died. It's still a small percentage.
Well, let me point out that that's confirmed cases that have been tested, and what we know is that that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. Some of the iceberg is being revealed through more testing, and you would expect to have an increase in cases the more people you test, but the testing positivity rate of those who are being tested is declining. The problem is the state has based their metrics on a decline across 4 different metrics, 2 of which are internally inconsistent. That is, if you are going to do more testing, you're going to find more cases. You're inexorably going to have an increase in the number of cases, even though it may be a smaller percentage of cases, and that's declining. So until they square that circle, and I suspect that the governor and his staff and Dr. Cohen will be evaluating that particular metric as he makes a determination, hopefully in the next day or two, relative to whether or not Executive Order 138, which is the phase 1 of the reentry process, terminates on the 22nd and is then the gateway into phase 2. What we don't know is exactly what the conditions and restrictions will be in phase 2 as to what constitutes a mass gathering, the amount of people or percentage of capability restaurants may have in terms of indoor dining or bars or gyms or barbers and beauticians. We don't know anything about that until that's published, and we hope to have that in this week so that our business community can be making the appropriate preparations to be able to open as early as possible. It's not a great business model to wait until 3 days before or 2 days before you tell people that they can open, to not tell them what the rules of the road are. But that's where we are.
What's the latest number of COVID cases that we've got in the hospital? It was bouncing around 5 or 6, 5 to 6.
Five hospitalized from what I
went to 7.
Did it go to 7? Okay. Today it went to 7.
Okay, great. So we have 3 hospitals with, on average, 2 patients in each hospital. It's time to open up. It's time to start opening up. I mean, we've shut down 3 hospitals, basically. I mean, they've started to accept other patients, but I mean, they got to open up, and they have sick people in them. Hospitals can't operate with 2 patients. Businesses can't operate with 2 customers. 0.003% died. Shoot. In the same time period, how many people died of other stuff? You know, I'm not saying be reckless. I'm not saying I don't care about folks, but it's pretty hard to make the case that we shouldn't be starting to open up our economy. Iredell County is not New York City. We just didn't see the big splurge.
Well, and part of that reason is people, I think, took social distancing seriously, and the fruits of their labor and their responsibility is proof of the pudding. The numbers that we have broadly track percentage-wise with the state of North Carolina writ large, which obviously is an average between rural counties that may have 1 case and some of the urban counties that have significantly more. But I would caution everyone that, you know, as we move into this new phase, that they need to focus on balancing personal choice and personal responsibility. We all have the choice to evaluate risks in our own lives, risk-benefit analysis, and we're all going to fall in different range on that spectrum. But we owe it to our neighbors and our families to exercise personal responsibility to ensure that we do not unduly subject other people to a virus that you may or may not know that you have. And just as we've managed to bend this curve and avoid the overtaxing of our medical facilities in a big way, if people become complacent and careless or uncaring, then we can be back in this same boat and go back from phase 3 that we might get to, back to phase 2, back to phase 1, to some other kind of lockdown. So people need to continue to take this matter seriously and consider that what you're doing is for the benefit of others and not as much for ourselves. And so, County Manager's report.
Okay, I know this has been a lengthy meeting, but I'm going to extend it a little bit longer. So I am here to present the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget message for the commissioners. Ms. Anderson is passing around a copy of the budget message. It is rather long. There is a lot that takes explanation, so I'm going to take the time and take the liberty to walk through this. I do have some charts and slides that will be up on the screen to follow along. On February 21st, 2020, the Board of Commissioners held a budget planning retreat where staff received direction regarding priorities for the upcoming year. Those priorities, along with the county adopted strategic plan and departmental goals, normally become the framework for what is recommended in the 2021 fiscal year budget. However, In a matter of a few weeks, our budget projections, financial viability, and life as we knew it changed dramatically. On March 3rd, 2020, North Carolina identified its first COVID-19 case, and on March 10th, the governor declared a state of emergency. On March 11th, COVID-19 was declared as a pandemic by the World Health Organization. On March 16th, Iredell County reported its first case of COVID-19 and declared a state of emergency the next day following March 17th. The weeks following included incremental increases of local positive cases, a state-mandated stay-at-home order, and an abrupt shift from a growing and prosperous economy to a virtual standstill in the blink of an eye. The county's budgeting process began in late December, early January, and included the analysis of several factors, including departmental needs, economic trends, and anticipated growth. Departmental budget requests were received in late February, and revenue projections were conservative but promising, with a projected increase of 2% in ad valorem revenue and 4% in sales tax revenue. Unfortunately, with the impact of COVID-19 in March, we began to closely track the negative impact of this global pandemic on our economy. Sales tax, our second largest revenue source, was the first projected decline due to the statewide stay-at-home order and mandated closure of certain businesses. While the full extent will not be known until June or July due to the 3-month lag in revenue receipts, as exhibited in Figure 1, what we do know is that the decline will be sharp. We don't know the duration of the deficit, unfortunately. We are projecting an overall 2.63% decline in sales tax revenues over the next fiscal year, with the largest dip in the months of June through December, and hopes of a moderate rebound in January. This is compared to Morgan Stanley's overall 2020 economic contraction projections of a 3% decline. Historically, Iredell County has fared better than statewide averages due to the stability of our economy and less dependency on tourism. Ad valorem tax revenues have also been adjusted downward to indicate a 5.85% increase as opposed to a 6.03% increase. We have modified our projected collection rate back to fiscal year 18-19, which is the actual rate of 98.91% due to future market uncertainty. Several unknown variables exist which make it difficult to accurately project revenues for the year ahead of us. For this reason, we have prepared a scaled-back budget in anticipation of worst-case scenario. Our hope is revenues will improve over the first half of the year, and that will allow us to revisit the budget mid-year. If improvement occurs, the revenue picks up. Eliminated items from the initial budget may be added back if funds are available to support them. Iredell County has two major challenges: managing cash flow and balancing the budget as required in the midst of so much uncertainty. In order to establish anticipated revenues as accurately as possible for the next fiscal year, we analyze building trends, population growth, state and federal policy decisions, unemployment rates, and personal income, just to name a few. New construction costs are a key indicator to an economic future and show builder confidence in the market. Permitted housing units are trending fairly flat when compared to permitted housing units for the month of January through April of 2020, which is exhibited in Figure 2. A comparison of the same months for the past 3 years has shown a trended decline in 2 years, with an increase in 2018. This is a promising pattern leading into the months impacted by COVID-19 and indicates our recovery may be a little easier if the phased reopening is successful. Most of that housing growth is seen in the southern portion of the county, but is beginning to move north, as indicated in Figure 3, which is a heat map showing that. Iredell County continues to grow at a relatively high rate. State projections for Iredell County's 2020 population indicate 184,023 residents, and we are projected to reach 194,595 residents by 2024. This indicates a 5.74% increase in population over the next 4-year budget cycle. Our current 2020 estimated population of 184,023 residents makes us the 14th largest county in the state of North Carolina, which is out of 100 counties. More importantly, out of all 100 counties in the state, there are only 12 that have a lower 2019-2020 tax rate. A A low tax rate is a double-edged sword in many respects. It assists in business recruitment retention and is appealing to new residents, but limits the county's ability to offer the same level of services as other similar-sized counties. It is a delicate balance of adequate service delivery and fiscal conservancy. However, in a time of economic decline as a result of COVID-19, our low tax rate is a blessing to our already struggling residents and businesses. One key way to sustain a lower tax rate is through strong, conservative fiscal management and diversification of our tax base through economic development. We continue to work hard to support our existing business and industries by fostering retention and expansion, as well as encouraging new business and industry recruitment. Job retention is a key to our current state of affairs, and we rely heavily on our teammates in this battle. With the partnership of the Iredell County Economic Development Corporation, we strive to foster an environment that creates a premier community to live, work, and raise a family. Our unemployment rate began to tick upwards beginning in January 2020, but collectively has decreased overall since 2013. As of March 2020, it was 4%, as indicated in Figure 4, which is below both the state and national level, which was at 4.4%. This indicates that Iredell County is faring slightly better than our state and nation as we entered this global pandemic. We know the impact of COVID-19 hit our job market in early April, and the state projects a sharp increase in unemployment numbers beginning with the month of April. The U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics reported the U.S. unemployment rate climbed from 4.4% in March to 14.7% in April. Economists have projected a state jobless rate between 12 and 15% for April, which would be higher than the 33-year unemployment peak of 10.9% experienced in 2010 during the slow recovery from the Great Recession. The two largest sources of Iredell County's revenue comes from ad valorem tax, which is 62.44% of our revenues, and local option sales tax at 16.57%, as depicted in Figure 5. When looking at all the economic indicators, ad valorem tax revenues are expected to increase 5.85%, which equates to 1.97% in the additional penny approved by the voters for the school capacity bonds, and 3.88% in valuation growth. Taking into consideration the ebbs and flows of all additional revenue sources, several of which are down regarding our fees for services, etc., the 2021 fiscal year budget recommendation is predicted on an overall growth of 3.46%, or $7,701,308. Of this new revenue, $2,638,397 is attributed to the newly approved 1 cent tax increase for the local capacity bonds for the schools and will go towards retiring that debt. Our fund balance has fluctuated over the past several years as we have saved up funds to pay for large capital projects. One of the largest projects funded out of the fund balance is the new Iredell County Detention Center that just recently came online this year. The board established a minimum threshold of 18% of operating expenses, and we have worked tirelessly to not just maintain but slowly build back our fund balance through the diligent savings of our departments and fiscally conservative policies established by the Board of Commissioners. Our fund balance is estimated to be at 18.9% of the recommended budget, and for that I am extremely grateful going into this very uncertain year ahead of us. The county's commitment to live within our means and prepare for financial uncertainty will pay off in the years ahead. This recommended budget does not anticipate the use of fund balance for normal operational funding. We are recommending the appropriation of 2 one-time expenditures for planning purposes, which includes $30,000 for the Transportation Plan Matching Grant and $250,000 for the Fairgrounds Master Plan Study. If revenues take a sharper decline, or the recovery takes longer than projected, the county will have some reserves to fall back on if needed. The county's fund balance policy and healthy debt profile will serve us well through the COVID-19 financial impact on our economy. We made every effort to satisfy the priorities of the Board of Commissioners while working within the confines of our available revenues as a result of our current economic condition. The majority of the requests are needs, but must be prioritized, delayed, and in some cases eliminated due to the limits in revenue. We modified each department's line item request to reflect actual spending over a 4-year historical perspective. We also rolled forward unspent funds in the fiscal year 20 budget to help cover some fiscal year 21 expenditures. This is possible through the spending limitations that were enacted in the last quarter of fiscal year 20 budget as a result of COVID-19. Figure 6 shows the breakdown of expenditures by category. These percentages are very similar to years past, with the top 3 areas being in education at 44.28%, public safety at 21.26%, and human services at 14.61%. This year, we made a concerted effort to revisit the educational funding formula, primarily in response to the request of the schools to shift our focus towards current expense funding. In years past, the county funded education 4 different ways: current expense, capital outlay, debt service, and safety and security. In an effort to streamline the funding process and fall in line with the funding methodology utilized by other counties in the state of North Carolina, we made the following modifications. Current expense will be funded on a per-pupil basis and will be calculated by getting an average of the counties in North Carolina with average daily membership, or ADM, that falls within 20% above and below Iredell County, according to the North Carolina Association of County Commissioner Budget and Tax Survey. This average will be obtained each reappraisal year, and Iredell County's funding level will be set at the new average or at the current funding level, whichever is higher. Each year thereafter, the per-pupil allocation will be increased by December U.S. Department of Labor unadjusted Total Consumer Price Index, or CPI, excluding any one-time adjustments from the prior year and not to exceed the estimated property tax revenue growth for the upcoming fiscal year. Capital funding. This would be equal to Chapter 105 of the North Carolina General Statutes, Article 40 and 42, Local Government Sales and Use Taxes. It will be distributed on an average daily membership between Iredell Statesville and Mooresville graded school systems. Large capital needs outside of normal maintenance, repair, replacement, and renovations will be vetted as part of the county's capital improvement plan. Debt service would be covered by the county's ad valorem tax collections to cover principal and interest amounts equal to the county's borrowings for the educational facilities. This amount will be adjusted annually in accordance with the retirement of principal and interest related to the debt service of those capital projects. School safety and security. This was a new budget created in fiscal year 20, and it was in the hopes of the passage of the quarter-cent sales tax. It would be funded through the county's, this budget would be funded through the county's allocation of 1/2 cent of ad valorem taxes to its public safety function for school safety and security as a temporary funding source to be used to complete the remaining capital needs for school safety and security identified for Mooresville graded, Iredell Statesville, and Mitchell Community College. These previously identified one-time capital needs, once they're satisfied, that funding source will expire. To date, both Mooresville graded schools and I have had a verbal commitment from Mitchell Community College that they will sign the new funding agreement, which shifted the focus to current expense funding as opposed to capital funding. Financial allocations for the 3 educational systems comprise 44.28% of the proposed general fund budget. In fiscal year 21, there is a total increase in current expense and capital outlay funding in the amount of $3,942,221, as depicted in Figure 7. This will increase the per-pupil amount to $1,940, up from $1,675 in fiscal year 20, and will be uniform between Iredell Statesville schools and Mooresville graded school district. Iredell Statesville will see an increase of 18%, or $6,818,810 in current expense, and a decrease of 44%, or $5,687,080 in capital outlay. Mooresville graded will see an increase of 18%, or $1,984,725 in current expense, and a decrease of 22%, or $574,198 in capital outlay. Mitchell Community College will receive 18%, or $639,794 more in current expense, and 80% or $760,170 in capital outlay in the upcoming year. Regarding personnel, as a service organization, our greatest strength are our employees, and I cannot say that enough. It is only through them we are successful and we can serve the citizens of Iredell County. The board recognized this and has taken proactive steps over the past several years to ensure that Iredell County is an employer of choice. We have and will continue to focus on turnover reduction, which is currently trending at 5.46% for the months of January through April 2020. This is a key factor in any successful and thriving organization because employee retention is more efficient than employee replacement. Staff retention is achieved through creating positive and safe work environments, ensuring your staff and engaging your staff and letting them know their voice is heard, showing appreciation and support, and encouraging positive morale and rewarding exemplary service. During a global pandemic, it would be assumed that this would be an impossible task, but we are fortunate to have dedicated and loyal staff that have a true servant's heart. Our staff have been called on more now than ever as a result of COVID-19, and the vast majority have answered the call unselfishly. Our health department and EMS agencies are dealing directly with COVID-19 patients and do so with compassion and self-sacrifice around the clock. Our emergency communications department has taken great steps to screen calls with the new COVID-19 protocols to send appropriate resources in order to protect the citizens and the responders. Our emergency management agency coordinates supply requests for the county and works tirelessly to address the demand for personal protective equipment for our medical providers and first responders. Our sheriff's office, who are already in high-risk profession, have to exercise an extra layer of diplomacy as they are the enforcement arm of the governor's stay-at-home order. Our social services department has seen a sharp increase in Medicaid applications and food and nutrition services and worked tirelessly to ensure assistance is on the way. Our information technology department adapted overnight to provide virtual solutions to allow uninterrupted service delivery. Our development services departments work creatively to adjust their normal practices to ensure that essential construction and development continues safely. Marriages, deaths, and property transactions still occur even with the stay-at-home order in place, and the Registry of Deeds office has responded. ICATs modified their transportation services to assist in meal delivery to those that were in need, while our vehicle services department works continually to keep our fleet of 465 vehicles maintained and operable. The library repurposed their facilities to assist students that don't have internet access to complete their required online learning as a result of the school facility closures. Facility services shifted their focus and began elevated sanitizing, cleaning, and maintenance of all 63 county properties to keep citizens and employees safe. Parks and Recreation recognized the increased demand on facility services and took advantage of the recreation center closure and began to perform required maintenance themselves, including painting the facility, performing parks and trail maintenance, and facility updates. Cooperative Extension helped coordinate a drive-in discounted food sale at the fairgrounds and works tirelessly to provide advice and assistance to our agricultural community that was already struggling to make ends meet. Solid Waste has seen a large spike in utilization as a result of the residents being home for extended periods of time tackling their spring cleaning. Animal Services continue to provide services and respond to assist our population that has no voice. Human Resources quickly shifted to interpret and apply the new Families First Coronavirus Response Act federal legislation in a matter of days and works to assist county employees impacted by the virus. Veteran Services continue to serve our soldiers and their families because the needs don't disappear even when our mobility is limited. Finance added to their busiest time, which is budget season, the minute-by-minute tracking of revenue loss and necessary expenditures and as a result of COVID-19. Elections and tax continue to follow mandated requirements as safely as possible and be an information resource for citizens that call frequently asking how this pandemic will impact the upcoming election, tax listings, and required payments. The calls for help continue and county employees answer without fail day and night. For these reasons, I struggle not to recommend a pay increase for those loyal public servants. However, in a time where our community is struggling and we are facing historical unemployment numbers, the revenues simply are not available. I am, however, recommending once revenues begin to recover and our economy rebounds, a salary scale adjustment be the first item the board contemplates adding to the budget if a mid-year review is possible. We received 27 full-time and 4 part-time new position requests this year. We were only able to recommend 8 full-time and 3 part-time, which are detailed below. Transitioning a part-time position to a full-time GIS mapping tech, simply due to the size of the county and the need to ensure that our GIS data is as accurate as possible. With a shift now to online service delivery, dependence on this information is critical. Converting previously contracted janitorial services into 2 full-time and 1 part-time day porter at the Health Department and Animal Services Cooperative Extension facilities. The cleaning and the level of cleaning required in these facilities is great, and in order to ensure it is done more frequently and on demand, we can provide better service for virtually the same amount of money by bringing those positions in-house. Adding 3 telecommunicators in our emergency communications department so we can begin monitoring the TAC channels for departmental interoperability and to help with the growth in call volume. We are also recommending a technical support specialist to assist in computer-aided dispatch, which is our CAD, which is our software, our CAD updates and programming, to assist with performing required quality assurance checks. Adding an administrative support assistant in the building standards department to assist in ensuring our online offerings are up to date and services do not suffer. Funding for the first year for this position will be realized through the mid-year delay in filling an inspector position, which we feel confident we can do based on the slowing economy. Adding a part-time planner position to assist in ensure plans are reviewed in a timely and thorough manner to help expedite the turnaround time to jumpstart our anticipated recovery. And adding a part-time EMS operations officer to assist in the growing regulatory requirements and demands on our service. As the county grows and the demand for services shift, we must ensure that we are maintaining our facilities and expanding where necessary. Within this budget, there is $605,000 proposed in facility improvements and $2,667,500 to fund identified projects in the capital improvement plan. We are also hoping to roll unspent contingency funds from the detention center and public safety center construction projects into this fund upon completion closeout. We have taken a hard look at capital projects for this fiscal year and trimmed them back substantially from what was reviewed and discussed at the winter retreat. And if the board will recall, we looked at much higher numbers at our retreat, but unfortunately we've had to scale those back dramatically. Our focus was on necessary projects, resulting in a delay of several less critical projects. Included in this budget are funds to make necessary ADA accessibility improvements at several county facilities and grounds, which you heard about a little bit earlier with our Recreation Master Plan review. We propose this to be a multi-year project with funds allocated each year to make these improvements. A parking lot extension at Government Center South, which is part of our lease agreement with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Natural Resources. New carpet at Government Center South in the new probation and parole and Diener spaces. The final year of the voice over IP phone system project and a portable generator that could be used at critical facilities during the loss of power. Funds are set aside for necessary ambulance replacements due to wear and tear of the current fleet. A repayment of borrowed funds to the future park fund and funds for a partnered sewer line extension at the Recreation Center with the town of Troutman and the Children's Hope Alliance. We also have funds earmarked as a set-aside for a future match to the ICAT's facility grant, which we anticipate having a revenue offset for those funds. With the newly approved 9-cent all-county fire tax, we have been successful in establishing a sustainable funding mechanism for the 19 contracted volunteer fire departments. Fire protection is a vital service Iredell County provides to the citizens through the assistance of the volunteer fire departments. The newly created fire funding formula allows for an increase in funding to the fire departments to help them address their most pressing need, personnel. It also establishes an apparatus replacement program based on age, mileage, and need. This helps the county plan several years down the road for necessary apparatus replacements that are rather large ticket items. With the success of the fire funding formula, we have modified the rescue funding formula, which is funded from the general fund, to address similar needs in the rescue service. The base funding formula is calculated on square miles and population in the various rescue districts, with additional funding set aside for apparatus and equipment replacement. The new funding mechanism will allow for an increase in funding to our rescue providers and allow for a rotation of apparatus replacement. It will also provide opportunities for the rescue providers to participate in bulk purchasing of similar equipment, which in turn would save taxpayers' dollars. This message fulfills my obligation under North Carolina General Statute 159-11 to present the recommended fiscal year 2020-2021 budget of $230,357,300. This will set the county tax rate at 53.75 cents per 100 valuation, which includes the newly approved 1 cent for the school capacity bond, which equates to $2,638,397. This budget is based on a tax base of $26,674,720,000, which is with a collection rate of 98.91%. The fund balance on June 30, 2020 is estimated to be $43,528,311, which is 18.9% of the recommended budget. Respectfully submitted, Beth Jones.
Can you repeat that?
I know that this is a lot. Just as a reminder, the budget is presented. Your budget books are downstairs in the clerk to the board's office, so please feel free to drop by and pick those up. They are lengthy.
Cart them off.
Yes, you will. You can cart them off. We will have our 2 budget workshops on the 26th and 28th. Both will be held at the Cooperative Extension Auditorium from 12 noon until 5 p.m. I just want to say this, and I would be remiss if I did not say this. Our department directors have done an amazing job. When they first did their budget and presented that, there was no indication that we were going to see what we have seen right now. Our budget team took those requests and virtually did 2 budgets. Our department directors did the first one. We started working on it. When we saw what was happening with our economy, we changed, we adapted, and basically started again. And everybody has been very cooperative. We have spent a lot of time. I want to say thank you to the commissioners for giving us the ability to push this out a little bit as far as the presentation of it and allow us to get as accurate numbers as we possibly could. We do not have a crystal ball of what's going to happen with our economy, but we have some indicators, and we're tracking those indicators. A lot of those indicators are out of our control at this point. You know, what the governor is going to say in the next day or two of whether we're going to move to phase 2, that impacts this budget. So what we did is we planned on a worst case scenario budget. What we're hoping is a whole lot easier to add back than to continue to cut deeper. So we presented a worst case scenario budget. We feel comfortable that we've got it covered, but we're hoping that in December, everyone can play Santa Claus and the board can say, yes, we'll add this back, and revenues are looking promising and we can add this back. That's our hope. But if that does not happen, you have a budget that we can sustain for the next year.
You're just a ray of sunshine.
Yeah. Ms. Jones, we really want to thank you and staff for the tremendous work that you've done in working to enact our policies just, from the beginning of the budget process and linking department goals and objectives with the budget, which is the way it's supposed to be. And then after having loaded the plane with, it's like a UPS or FedEx plane. You just loaded it full of all the boxes, and they're all, appropriately categorized. You're rolling down runway and you're taking off, and all of a sudden you've been told, you're overweight, and you need to,
One less engine.
And so in the process, you've managed to crawl around in the cargo hold, pull out packages, repackage stuff, box it up, put it on pallets, and strap a parachute to it, so that you can jettison those, keep flying, and then we can go circle back and land and pick up that cargo if we have the room and the fuel left to fly. So you literally have moved heaven and earth in terms of staff and all levels, putting their shoulder to the wheel and presenting a budget that is realistic and conservative in its assumptions. And we all hope that we will have a more optimistic result than the one we planned for. And hopefully in January we can come back and start reloading the aircraft, because everything that was on that aircraft had been vetted and had
Needs
been
to ship.
reviewed, and taking care of our people, and our facilities, and providing services for our citizens. But just like everyone's had to make adjustments in their personal family budgets, we have to make adjustments in our collective county budget. So we thank you. And any other comments?
That's it.
I have a couple. Just on behalf of our General Government Task Force and our board, I just want to reiterate what these gentlemen have said. I want to reiterate, in conversations with citizens, I want to remind them we're still a growing county, the 14th largest in the state of 100. There's only 12 counties out of 100 counties in North Carolina with a lower tax rate. Double-edged sword. People demand services, expect services in a growing county, and I think we've delivered that. I just want to say, to be brief, I want to continue to ask people for their prayers, their patience, their cooperation. Our staff, our citizens, we all have to navigate through this pandemic situation together as Iredell County citizens, North Carolina citizens, and American citizens. But, we've modified our services. We have not shut down. We've done that in a situation to add caution to our employees and to our citizens, even though some of this stuff may have caused a little burden to some people, but it was in an effort to prevent safety, to add safety for our citizens and our employees. But I just want to say thank you to staff for the work. Thank you to all of our dedicated emergency services and all employees. But I mostly want to thank our taxpayers for their grace and their patience, because we're doing the best we can. To Commissioner Robertson and our entire board, we agree that we want to get our economy back open as soon as possible. We don't have the authority to override the governor or the president, just like I can't give you the authority to pass on a double yellow line or drive drunk. So we want people, again, to have patience and grace, and we want to thank you. We're going to get all of our data and supportive information for our budget next week, and we've had some calls from citizens with questions, concerns, requests, and demands to get open back up. But guys, I want you to know our board and our staff and our dedicated emergency services people are doing the best we can in the circumstances, and want to wish your families safety, security, and we're doing the best we can for you. I just wanted to make those comments and thank you all for your work.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Commissioner
Norman.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Ms. Jones and the entire staff for what they've done to prepare this budget and get us ready for this next coming year. I do appreciate everything they've done.
Short, sweet, to the point.
Short and sweet, Marvin.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
If I could make a point or two. Just wanted to make an observation. Pretty bleak revenue picture, but as I understand your numbers there, the school systems will get more money.
Correct. They will get more money. They will get more money from last year
They will get, that's all you need to say. For those who say Iredell County isn't as good or doesn't support education as much as XYZ, once again, look at any graph by any measure you want to take. Iredell County always gives the schools more money first.
Correct.
Period. So anybody that wants to say that we don't support education, they are devoid of the facts. Okay? Number two, the point I want to make, and this is on your comments, and I love that you put it on the very first page. Sales that occur in March, retailers file their paperwork in April, Department of Revenue does their magic in May, and the counties will not see the first impact, the first negative downward impact until June. So this entire budget has been made with us not really knowing what the impact, the negative impact of sales tax collection is going to be. I will tell you, from going through the Great Recession, that impact was surprisingly bigger than we thought. So there's two messages there. Number one, this budget that they're putting together is a budgetary estimate. If those sales tax revenues come in a lot lower than projected, then this budget that she's talking about might have to get modified again. The reason I say that is not to imply that they don't know how to forecast. It's that everybody should be prepared that this budget might have to get adjusted down a little bit one more time. The next thing I'd like to say is for all the folks, whether it was people who wanted to spend sales tax, we're going to have a sales tax and we're going to hire SROs. We're going to have a sales tax and we're just going to give the money to the schools. We're going to have the sales tax and the county government was going to get a part of it. We're going to have a sales tax. We're going to build a new fairgrounds. We're going to have a sales tax. We're going to have a new recreation master plan. You're getting ready to find out that if you tie a revenue source to sales tax, be prepared to ride a roller coaster. Okay? That is not the end all for anybody that thinks that they've got a revenue problem, that somehow a sales tax is gonna make their life gets for their life to get better. Just as a general observation is when times like this get tough, if everybody shoulders part of the load, nobody gets crushed. It's uncomfortable for everybody. Some people it's going to be worse than others. But if everybody shoulders part of the load, we'll make it through. We always have. We always will. If I could just make an observation and a request. Between the school system and emergency services, 66% of our budget. That's it. We run every other function of county government
on 1/3 of the
on 1/3 of the revenue. A whole lot gets done on 1/3 of the revenue. I would like to not ask and have you answer the question now, but just in the future. I think we all expect that there will be a second wave of the virus probably when cold and flu season returns in earnest again in the fall. And there was lots of discussion and angst about having PPE and did we already have it? Was there money? Could you buy it? Whatever. I think at some point, not tonight, it'd be really good if we could talk about what what that is going to look like, because that's probably impacting some of your budget. Thank you very much for, personally, I've been very fortunate. I've had Joel Mashburn, Ron Smith, and now you, Beth, as county managers. And I remember Joel Mashburn saying that the county manager adopts the priorities of the board as his own and creates a budget that reflects that, everything, you're going to be okay. And congratulations, Beth, because I think that the way you described the budget and the way you presented it, I can't think of any degrees of separation between what you said and what you've put together and what I've heard this board state. So thank you very much. And I because by doing that, we don't have this preset conflict, which everybody loses when that happens. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Can I add a little context?
Yeah.
Can I add a little context to something, please? Just a minute.
Comment section, we still got to.
Okay, all right.
I just wanted to add a little clarification. James and I serve for the board on the Education Task Force. And for the record, I just want to say that the schools, Iredell Statesville schools especially, ask us to look at a funding formula that had some consistency to it so they could try to set a budget annually. And so what we did, our staff worked really hard along with their staff. There were some recommended tweaks and changes along the way, working collaboratively with their staff and their board, and we did that. But I wanted the public to know that that was the intent of it. They asked us to better fund current expense, which is their operations side. All of these priorities then go to their elected board, as we are by the citizens. Their board will then have the opportunity from operations and capital set their priorities, where they want to fund nurses, SROs, teachers assistants, whatever that may be. But I wanted it for the record to know our board and our staff has done what they asked us to do to give them the best possible funding, and it was an increase, 44% of our budget. And so I wanted people to understand in context, the internal decisions and priorities will be made by them. We don't run the school system. We help pay for the capital stuff. And so I wanted that on the record, that's why we did the new funding formula. And there was an increase. There's a decrease on capital side. We understand there will be annual tweaks for shortfalls and things we may have to look at with them. But none of us have a crystal ball. And we'll do the best we can with the revenue available. And we made a point in 2018 to say, if there was no permanent revenue stream on the safety and security budget, it would be terminated. And we're going to complete the approved priorities as they were then and live up to our end of the deal. We've given the schools back their portion of that revenue, and we're going to continue funding it until those identified projects are met. But from the Education Task Force, I just wanted to clarify for the record and the public why we did it, who asked us to do it, and that it is an increase overall. And I think we do a good job with the revenue available to maintain, as we said before, one of the lowest tax rate, property tax rate counties in the region or the county in the state. So I just wanted it on the record why we did it and how we did it. Thank you for all the work.
Amy, is anybody called in? Okay, so no public comments this evening. All hearts free.
Mr. Chairman, one point of clarification. Instead of adjourning, we do need to do a recess until our workshop on the 26th.
All right. Is there a motion to go into recess until Tuesday?
12 noon on the 26th.
The 26th.
Can I just make one parting comment? If you're going to go shopping in Iredell County.
Absolutely.
Unless some other county has something that you absolutely cannot buy. If you want to go out to eat in Iredell County, because restaurants are going to be opening up hopefully soon. If you got to buy a widget, buy it in Iredell County, because I'm going to tell you, if you're going to buy something anyway, either the sales taxes can go to help Mecklenburg County, or they can go help your friends and neighbors. When I was in the Army, I used to get tired of people tying a yellow ribbon, but they were willing to send soldiers to war in unarmored Humvees and without protective vests and all this kind of good stuff. I don't want to see ribbons, man. We needed the money. And people say, well, we support our emergency service workers and our EMS folks. Good. If you want to support them, I don't want to see a ribbon on your shirt. When you go buy something, buy it in this county, because the money that we get, if we get enough money, they'll get raises. Everybody can get raises, and their equipment can be the most modern, and we'll buy all the PPE they need. Okay? But what you can do is buy local. I'm not saying buy stuff you don't need, but if you're going to buy something, buy it here and buy American. That's it.
Iredell strong.
Who has the motion to recess? Okay, Gene, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. We are in recess.
Good night, Mr. Norman.